When Nagisa and Honoka first transformed into Cure Black and Cure White, they gave the typical magical girl speech that fans of the genre are all too familiar with. This one ended up being a bit different, as when they were done the speech, Nagisa actually pointed out that the words automatically came to them. With the pre-built-in speech and Pretty Cure being referred to as legendary warriors, it got me thinking, was there a Cure Black and Cure White before Nagisa and Honoka? Ironically, the first season where we knew for sure that there were past cures was Heartcatch Pretty Cure, where each cure had to come up with her own name and speech. With that thought being a starting point, I'd like to go over the extra cures of the franchise, which would include cures of the past, and other cures not a part of the core group of that season. Since I already did a power scaling video for the franchise, why not continue it and go over the strength of these side cures? Some things to go over before diving into this. First, this should be obvious, but I'm only referring to cures and not just allies of the cures. Second, as long as the character is clearly a cure, then they're on the list. I'm saying that since a character like Infinity Silhouette does not have cure in her name, but is referred to as the strongest Pretty Cure and is a fusion of cures, so she's clearly a Pretty Cure. Speaking of which, should I include her even though she's made up of the main Heartcatch cures? Screw it, why not? Thirdly, I'm only covering past cures where we know for sure that there were past cures. Mahou Girls, for example, seem to have past cures, but then when we get the history of the mundane and magical worlds, it's implied that the current cures were the only cures. The last disclaimer is how I'm power scaling them. In my How Strong is Pretty Cure video, I gave you the tiers of power they were at. This many times the speed of light, universal, etc. For this video, instead of saying what level the extra cures are, I'm going to be comparing them to the main cures of that season, and judging their strength that way. With all that out of the way, let's see their power. We begin with the key Resistors in Splash Star. Enemies turned friends and allies, they became cures during the final battle against Gohyon. To understand their strength, we need to back up a bit and look at the main cures of this season. You see, Splash Star is pretty unique amongst Pretty Cure seasons as it gave the girls different cure forms. I'm not talking about a power-up or version of the form, I'm saying a completely different cure form. Mai and Saki with Flappy and Choppy became Cure Egret and Cure Bloom. When Flappy and Choppy were kidnapped, Mai and Saki were able to pair up with Moop and Foop to become Cure Windy and Cure Bright to save them. The Windy and Bright forms have the ability to fly, and each cure now has their own projectile attack. These forms were also initially stronger than the Egret and Bloom forms, but once Flappy and Choppy were rescued, it was stated that the forms got stronger and now were equal in terms of raw power. So, during the final battle, the Cure Sisters became Cure Bright and Cure Windy. With all of them receiving the same boost, they are all equals. This includes them also having the Splash Star's power-up item, the Spiral Rings. The four cures defeat Gohyon by performing the Spiral Heart Splash Star, which gives Gohyon a flashback of the Big Bang. After the fight, the Cure Sisters had their bodies changed into normal human girls because they were made from the power of destruction, and with that gone, they were going to die. Whether they can still become cures is up in the air, as the only time we've seen them transform since is in the Hugtoad crossover, but that's not really helpful since they had cures that we knew could still transform, and ones we knew were being granted a transformation for the special occasion. So if they can still transform, then they would simply scale to whatever level Mai and Saki are currently at. Dark Pretty Cure 5. Copies of the Yes Pretty Cure 5 team created by Shadow for the use of crystals. Despite being imitations, they had their own attacks, and are actually stronger than the Yes 5 team given the trouble they gave them during the fight. With that said, the Yes 5 team grew stronger over the course of the fight, and each cure beat their doppelganger. Each member of the Dark Pretty Cure 5 team would end up dying, 4 of them from the original cures, and Dark Cure Dream by sacrificing herself to save Cure Dream. On to Heartcatch, where the fight between the cures and the Desertrians has lasted for 400 years. Lots of cures, though we don't know the names to most of them. Go figure. Thankfully, we do know the weakest and strongest cures in the series, so we can make the tiers to say where these cures would go, and then get into the specific cures that we do know about. I'll be making the tiers by comparing them to the main Heartcatch team, but it should be noted that I am referring to them before episode 45. This is due to them receiving a massive amp after they got curb stomped by a Power Seal Dune and then got their resolve to keep fighting. This amp made them amongst the strongest cures of the Heartcatch line, and that's why I'm using their pre-amp versions to make the tiers. Cure Blossom is verbatim stated to be the weakest Pretty Cure at the beginning of the series, so we know all past Pretty Cure were stronger than her. Cure Marine is not referred to as weak at all except by Kumojaki when referring to both her and Blossom. He also said he could take on 100 cures, which is clearly false given the series, and even states that he was wrong to call them weak. Point is, Marine is more of what is expected out of a Pretty Cure, and interestingly, she is stated to only be slightly stronger than Blossom. So the gap between the weakest Cure and what would be the beginning of an average Cure isn't that big. Cure Sunshine is interesting as you could either consider her to be the tail end of being an average Cure or the beginning of a top tier Cure. This is due to her easily defeating a Death Archerian that was previously beating both Marine and Blossom. This was halfway into the series, so both Marine and Blossom had gotten a lot stronger. The other point is that she was able to do the best amongst the three Cures against Dark Pretty Cure, who's a rival to Cure Moonlight, meaning definite top tier material. Sunshine's barrier managed to block Dark Pretty Cure's attacks, and her Gold Forte Burst was able to restrict the evil Cure. She wasn't on Dark Pretty Cure's level, as even being hit by a Floral Power Fortissimo while being restricted didn't hurt Dark Pretty Cure that much, and they needed Moonlight to save them the next time they fought her, but being able to affect Dark Pretty Cure at all deserves credit. So there are your ranges. Average goes from beginning of series Marine to Sunshine, and top tier is Sunshine and stronger. Now, onto specific Cures. I mentioned her already, so might as well cover her first. Dark Pretty Cure. Dark Pretty Cure was initially stronger than Cure Moonlight. While in their first fight you could say it was because Sabaku helped her winning the first Forte Wave clash in their rematch after suggesting that Moonlight had gotten stronger firmly places her above Moonlight for the first 2/3 of the series. Of course, Moonlight grew even stronger and ultimately won their rematch. Dark Pretty Cure then got stronger to the point that just by staring, pushed back all 4 Cures in their Super Silhouette forms. In the end, she lost to a post-episode 45 amped Moonlight, and was at a noticeable disadvantage throughout the fight compared to how close their first rematch was. Kieran, the Cure from 400 years ago who defeated Baron Salamander and sealed his powers away. Cure Moonlight was mentioned to have a similar demeanor as her, so it's possible that her defeat of Baron wasn't that hard for her. In comparison, it took the current Cure's strongest attack, the Heartcatch Orchestra, to match Baron's full power, and they were eventually going to lose that clash had it not been for them being boosted by the Miracle Lights. So, she's firmly above the Heartcatch Cures until they have their episode 45 amp due to their scaling to Dune and the next Cure we're talking about. Cure Flower, the grandmother of Cure Blossom. According to the Heartcatch Pretty Cure light novel, she was the strongest Cure of the Heartcatch line. She managed to match full power Dune and seal a portion of his power. Even a much weaker version of her that couldn't even use her Forte Wave was still well above the current Cures. Post episode 45 amp, they clearly surpassed this weakened version of Cure Flower by fighting a stronger Dune. But they wouldn't surpass her prime in Heartcatch. That would happen through the constant growth in the All-Star films. This of course means surpassing full power Dune, which I discussed in my How Strong is Pretty Cure video by comparing this situation with the Doki Doki Cures, but I'll save that scaling for later since there are past Cures in Doki Doki, and the scale for surpassing them is pretty much the same thing. Infinity Silhouette, or Mugen Silhouette, whichever you prefer, is the fusion of the 4 Heartcatch Cures. Infinite Love, Infinite Power. She is the strongest Pretty Cure. She certainly proves to be the strongest Cure of the Heartcatch line by easily defeating Dune in one punch. As for the Heartcatch Cures ever surpass their own fusion, who knows? No solid details either way. I do make a possible scale for them being stronger in my How Strong is Pretty Cure video, so go check that out. And if I had to go with my gut feeling, then I would say that they have surpassed her after all this time. Which logically would make a theoretical All-Stars version of Infinity Silhouette insanely powerful. With Heartcatch done, we move on to Smile with the Bad End Cures. Like Dark Pretty Cure 5, they were evil copies of the Smile Cures created by Joker. They were stronger than the Smile Cures' base forms as self-admitted by Cure March. It took the Smile Cures entering their ultimate forms in order to win. The Smile Cures in base have surpassed their Bad End counterparts, as base Cures can beat King Perot in Miraculous Magic, who was superior to the Bad End Cures. Cure Echo, the only Cure to originate from the All-Star movies, and as such we'll have to compare her to different main teams instead of just one. She first appeared in New Stage, which was when the Smile Cures were the newest Cures, so she should be comparable to them. She also fought alongside the Co-Princess Cures in Miraculous Magic, but that doesn't really tell us anything as different teams fight together all the time. Her most significant action came in New Stage 3, where she destroyed a Nightmare Dome that Black and White's Marble Screw Max could only damage. Unfortunately for Echo, this seems to be due to an amp by the Miracle Lights, given that the lights were glowing when she made the fairies her partners, and the glowing orbs that the Miracle Lights made when the fairies were talking to her surrounded her while she transformed. Even if you don't believe that, you could still say that the dome became weaker thanks to Black and White, so the feat is still a bit questionable. I do think it is fair that since she doesn't have any teammates, she could grow at a faster rate than some of her Cure Senpais, but I think having her be around the level of the Smile cures is more reasonable than having her be on the level of the Max Heart cures. On to Doki Doki, where we have the 3 legendary cures: Cure Empress, Cure Magician, and Cure Priestess. Each wielded one of the 3 sacred treasures and implied to have realized the treasure's full potential unlike anyone else in the series. For strength, we know that they should be above their fairy, Melon, who was able to defeat the current Doki Doki cures, though would likely lose to them after they scale above the Blood Ring Selfish. We know that they weren't able to beat Proto Selfish and could only seal him away. It should be noted that given Proto's reaction to it, it seems that the legendary cures never tried to do their own version of the Partheon form, so we can't say that the Doki Doki cures are stronger since they had a stronger final form. With this information, tough to say exactly how the Doki Doki cures compare by the end of the series. I'm leaning more towards the legendary cures due to their use of the sacred treasures. The Doki Doki cures would surpass them in Miraculous Magic, where base cures can fight Proto and defeat him. Moving to Happiness Charge, and we have the international cures. Cures all over the world! Can't really make ranges like I did in Heartcatch, but comparing them to the Happiness Charge team is pretty simple. The Happiness Charge team are stated to be the toughest cures even before they have Cure Fortune. Cure Fortune being stronger than any of the Happiness Charge cures at the time, and stated by Phantom to be stronger than any cure he's faced before. That statement is amended later though, where he states that Cure Tender, Cure Fortune's older sister, was the strongest cure he faced. Point is, Happiness Charge as a team is stronger than any other cures in the series before they even receive power-ups. So not much point in talking about the few named international cures, but we still do have 2 cures to talk about here. Cure Tender, as I mentioned before, was stated to be the strongest cure Phantom had faced, and she only lost the fight because she had to protect her sister. After being brainwashed and amped as Dark Tender, she returned to being Cure Tender and continued to fight against the Phantom Empire. In terms of how she compares to the Happiness Charge cures, we see her and her sister have an untransformed martial arts fight that Tender wins. So she's stronger than any one of the Happiness Charge cures when they're in base. If they go as a team or just one of them activates Innocent form, then they should be above her. She also went to go help the international cures, so it's likely she helped lessen the gap between the international and Happiness Charge teams. Cure Mirage, the first cure from 300 years ago, and thanks to some heartbreak and brainwashing, she became the villainous Queen Mirage. We aren't exactly given a comparison of how strong she is now compared to her cure days, but it can be assumed that she is at least as strong as she was back then. This is due to her new powers originating from Red, Blue's brother, who should share similar if not greater power than Blue if the final fight is any indication. We also saw that she was able to amp Cure Tender when she was controlled as Dark Tender, so that speaks well to her ability. With that established, we see Cure Lovely match her in their fight, and when Mirage received a Rage boost, Innocent form Lovely could match blows at first, but did ultimately need the rest of the cures to win. In Go Princess, we had the original Princess cures. We know they defeated the Despair in the past, and they had obtained the Grand Princess transformation. As for the current Go Princess cures are stronger, they are. We had the memories of the past cures tell the current ones that the darkness will revive stronger than it ever has before, and the current cures were able to face it. Given they had Grand Princess form, they are likely still relative to end of series cures. On to Mahou Girls, and while we don't get the Magician cures of Legend, we do get Cure Milferon. The cure Toei somehow lost the rights to. Mirai's childhood stuffed animal was brought to life by magic, and in the Mahou Girls movie, she makes a wish to save Mirai, which turns her human and into a cure. Still full of cotton though. Cure Milferon did far better against Dark Matter than any of the other Mahou cures. Where their attacks were blocked and didn't impress Dark Matter, Cure Milferon was able to match him and even knock him around at points. This was a one-time transformation though, and only popped up one other time thanks to a special occurrence in the Hokuto crossover. The Mahou Girls should surpass Milferon by the end of their own series, given the size of the boost they got. Cure Lumiere is the past cure and legendary Patissiere of Cure Pretty Cure a la mode. She faced Noir, her dormant power from her altar amped Julio enough to help the cures, and gave her strength to the cures to amp them. She was surpassed by the Cure cures as they were able to overpower Elisio, who at that time had his own power, Noir's power, and Lumiere's power. Cure Pecorin, like Milferon before her, was the mascot character becoming a cure, only this time she keeps her transformation. When the rest of the cures lost their emotions, she made donuts to try and jog their memories of all the times they spent cooking together. When the donuts were nearly destroyed, she saved them, and the Kiraru power within them allowed her to become a cure. While deemed strong enough to protect the town by herself so that the rest of the cures could pursue their dreams, it is pretty clear that she is the weakest member. In Hokuto, we have everyone in the city becoming a cure. And all they do is cheer. Yeah, it provides energy for the Hokuto cures to win, but no real feats for themselves. Not even earlier when it was just Cure Infini, who only outmaneuvered a wild Oshimida. As the power is derived from the Hokuto cures, or at least one of their items, it can be assumed that those cures are at least relative to the Hokuto cures and just have a short time limit for their transformation. We also have the future cures, who actually came before the Hokuto cures because of time travel and different timelines. We know that Hugtan was one of these cures, here tomorrow, and she became a baby because she expended all her mother power. She could stop time, travel through time, summon people, and even as Hugtan wished she should be weaker, was able to beat an Oshimida in episode 10 that was giving Cure Ange and Cure Toll trouble, though at the cost of getting a fever. It should also be noted that due to the amount of Toki power in the future, the Oshimida that the future cures fought were stronger than what the Hokuto cures usually faced. This is clearly demonstrated as the cures by this point could easily deal with a wild Oshimida, only for them to face one in the future and it beat them before they were able to turn the tide of the fight. The future cures eventually lost their fight, whereas the Hokuto cures were able to win theirs, even facing off against at least 64 wild Oshimidas, Kiriel being able to push off 12 ant wild Oshimidas, and face the giant Kurai monster. Yeah, I'd say the Hokuto cures surpassed their cure senpais. Cure kohais? Darn time travel terms. Lady Tina Tinu's partner in Healing Good Pretty Cure is the last known extra cure. It's funny that I say known when we don't actually know her name, but we do know what she looks like. This is thanks to Asumi, aka Cure Earth, who was made in her image and given part of her power. With that said, Lady Tina Tinu's partner likely wasn't the original Cure Earth, as while King Byojin noted Earth's similarities to the past cure, the name didn't seem to strike him. As for her power, we have an interesting case. You see, the big bad in the past wasn't held off by this cure. He was held off by Lady Teratinu. Each mention of the fight between Lady Teratinu and King Byojin puts them as equals and really gives the impression that no one else was involved with it. So does that mean that this cure was so much weaker than Lady Teratinu that she would have been more of a hindrance in that fight? Or was she equal to Lady Teratinu and the circumstances just didn't allow her to reach Teratinu to help her? Who knows, but at least we can make a range from this. Just one part of a weakened King Byojin was unimpressed with the Healing Good cures to the point where he said they were unworthy of being Pretty Cure, with them needing the final Healing Good shower in order to beat this segment of him. So, we have Lady Teratinu's partner ranging from being able to beat one part of a weakened King Byojin, presumably pretty easily based on what King Byojin had said, to a max of matching Lady Teratinu's full power. How do the Healing Good cures compare? Well, they likely scale above the bottom endpoint of the range due to healing at Daruzin, who had used 11 megaparts on himself without too much trouble. This matters as that would have put Daruzin in the same order of power as Garura, who had used 10 megaparts on himself and was stronger than that one part of the king, thus the cures would also scale above that part. As for the upper endpoint, they only surpassed Lady Teratinu's power when the wills of every being on the planet resonated with the cures, amping them to where they could beat Neo King Byojin. It's unclear if they retained this amp though, and maybe their team up with the S5 crew will clear it up. And that's all the extra cures. Tropical Rouge does seem to view a past cure as actual history and not a legend, so chances are we will get another extra cure this season, but nothing specific as of this recording. If we do get one, I'd imagine they'd be superior to our still relatively new cures, like her probably being faster than light compared to the Tropical Rouge cures only being relative to light at the moment. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and go watch Tropical Rouge Pretty Cure. It's quite an enjoyable season.